And what began to happen is I would grab a gun and I would put one in the chamber and I would sit there. And I remember vividly sitting on the edge of my bed and grabbing a gun, racking the slide, putting one in the chamber and holding it and staring at it. And I just waited. Part of me feels like I was just curious what would happen. Here's the opportunity, here's the motive, what would happen? Like, would I end my life? Because I was just so broken. I remember being on the couch and I would, same thing, grab a gun, put one in the chamber and see what came first. Would I unload it and take it all the way apart and step away from that situation, or go the other way? I had 3 older sisters. My dad worked construction, and for most of what I remember, my mom was at home just kind of taking care of us. And, you know, as a kid, when you're the only boy, like, you really look up to your dad and emulate them as the man of the house. And you kind of want to spend all your time with them and learn everything that you can from them. And then after my parents got divorced, I kind of had a choice of, I guess, who I wanted to live with. And so obviously, again, I moved in with my dad. And it was kind of weird. Like, once just him and I lived together, and, you know, I started to notice that, you know, we spent less time together and things like that. There was kind of a divide in our relationship, and in reality, right, looking back on it, it was just him. He was working and providing and doing the things that he knew how to do in order to make sure that I had a better life, right, than he did, and than what he's seen other people in his family have. And so, like, at this point in time, I understand that, but back then it was tough. And so I started kind of acting out and, you know, hanging out with the wrong crowd and things like that, just trying to find another male role model, or that male role model that, you know, I could look up to and spend time with. And, you know, that divide, I think, lasted until college. All through high school, it just kind of got worse and worse. I just felt like he was really hard and just always kind of pushing, right? Do this better, do that better. This is wrong, that's wrong. And I didn't understand it at the time. And so fast forward to college, I started realizing, you know, somebody would say something and I was like, oh yeah, well, and I would have a response and I would immediately think like, man, that's what my dad said. And you know, it was tough when I went to college because we had that fracture in our relationship, that it was to the point to where when I was prepared to move into the dorms, he asked, hey, you know, you want me to drive down there and help you move in? And I told him no. And, you know, man, I can't imagine, right, like what that felt like for a father, for someone to be experiencing this new thing, being the first one to go to college in the family, and you know, almost saying, I don't want you to be a part of this. And it's because I couldn't see through kind of the fog of I don't know if it was hatred, but I couldn't see through that fog, right, of the broken relationship that we had. And it's one of the things that I always kind of look back on and think like, man, my dad is a tough dude for kind of not smacking me around, or, you know, not voicing hurt in that situation. But after college, I mean, through the last 3 years of college and afterwards, me and my man were tight, you know, talked pretty much every week, sometimes, you know, every day. And, you know, it was kind of back to the childhood thing, back to him being my rock, you know, hey, I got this coming up, what do you think I should do? Hey, I got to do this, what do you think about this? And we kind of just went back and forth, and kind of always there just to support and to look out and to give advice. And, you know, sometimes I didn't listen to the advice, but it was awesome to always have him there. And I would say he was probably one of the only people who would just text me consistently just to say, hey, how you holding up? Oh, I'm good. Cool. That was it. And it was just a check-in, right, to make sure that maybe A, I was doing the right thing, but B, that I was holding up, right? I was a broke college kid at that time. And then after that, I graduated with the bachelor's. I worked at a hospital for a while, transitioned to a different position, and then went to PT school. So for the longest time, ever since college, I was kind of gone and pursuing something, right? Whether it was a college degree or a higher degree, I was just in pursuit. And, you know, again, to my dad, we talked about it. He's like, no, I never want you to feel like you can't go and pursue what it is that you want, or you can't go and pursue excellence, because I want that for you. That's why I did what I did the entire time you were growing up. That's why I did all of these things, right? I know I wasn't there a lot, but here's why. And I just started to forge a deeper and deeper appreciation for him because of the sacrifice that he made for my entire life. And so graduate school, got done, came home, lived at home for a while. But even while I was at home, I was just grinding, studying for the board exam and working, driving Uber, just trying to, pay for my car bill and for food, right? Eating Chipotle every day. And once I got that degree, or once I got the license and took the test and everything, I moved to Arizona. And not very long after that, my dad was diagnosed with cancer. And when they found it, it was already stage 4, right? That was the craziest thing about how they found it. He was just going in for a normal blood test. Numbers came back kind of crazy, and it led him down this rabbit hole to eventually find out that he had prostate cancer. And so I think in that moment I asked him, I said, hey, you want me to move back? Do you want me to, what's up? What are you thinking? He's like, no, you guys are out there, you started a business, you're doing this, you're doing that. I would never have you drop that on the account of me. We'll get through this. And, so we prayed and we did what we knew to do, right? We made sure that he was going to appointments, and I would check his lab values and, kind of let him know, keep him informed. Okay, this means this means that, this is what this means, here's what we don't want. Fast forward to 2021, and I'm at work one day and I get a phone call, and then it's a call from my sister, and she says, hey, they just told Dad he's got 6 months to live. Man, I remember that moment like it was a piercing pain, right? I mean, being in medicine and understanding the reality of what stage 4 means, I almost think that you're a child and a son first. And so I just felt, we'll get through it. We get through it. We'll find a way. We'll get through it. And hearing that, right, to me felt like the doctors had gave up on him. And again, I guess I understand the reality of it, but no one wants to hear that. And I just remember leaving work devastated. I left immediately, came home, and I called him. And, I didn't know what to say. What do you think? How you feeling? And we had a conversation. About, 30 years worth of everything, pain and happiness and joy and fears and regrets and sorrows. And, he ended with, don't ever be mad at God, right? He quoted Job and said, Job went through all these things and he never once cursed God's name. And he said, no matter what happens, don't ever be mad at God. And I apologized for all the things I had did. I apologized again for, how I treated him when I was in high school. I apologized for not being there more. I apologized for not being a better son. I apologized for always chasing something that wasn't family. And deep down, one of the things that I wanted him to see, at some point in time after we had already known he was diagnosed, I wanted him to see our business thriving. I wanted him to be able to come to Arizona and walk into the building and touch the turf and feel the weights and see us interacting with patients and say, man, my son's doing a good thing. Less than 48 hours later, he passed. 5 a.m, I get a phone call. He passed in his sleep on. It was weird, right? Because you feel like you're dreaming anytime you hear something like that, and you hope you're dreaming. And for me to look at that and say, okay, they gave up on them and said they had 6 months. How can they be so wrong? We thought, okay, great, we'll travel, we'll still see each other. And that was one of the other things, COVID was rampant at that time. And so another reason that we didn't travel and go home to see him was because we had to get on the plane and get out there. And who knew with COVID, right? Are we going to contract it while we're on the airplane and then go take it to him with his weakened immune system? There was just so much. And when I looked back on it after he passed, everything kind of seems trivial, right? It felt like I had made excuses for the last 7 years about why I couldn't see him. I was always too busy. I was always doing this. I was always doing that. I always had this coming up. It was exams. It was whatever the case may be. I was so hurt that I wasn't there, and I felt like I wasn't there for him. And, let him tell it, I was, right? And to this day, I still don't know if I could have acted differently. But one thing that he always told me is, had you known then what you know now, you probably would have done things differently. And man, that's such a true and powerful statement, but it's also painful to recognize. And it wasn't smooth and it wasn't easy, right? My closest sister blamed me for the same thing I blame myself for. You were never here, you were never this, you never did that, da 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 da. And for it to be her, of any of them, of my three sisters, for it to be her to say that, that was and still is one of the most painful things that I've ever heard, right? I understand that she was mourning and things like that, but that was rough. I had another sister that, she was just in it for the money. So we felt, she hired her own lawyer to make sure that she was going to get a certain amount and this, that, and the other. And I felt like maybe I was dealing with it okay, minus the fact that I was drinking a lot to get through the night. And, I was crying myself to sleep. And then it kind of got dark. It kind of got really dark. And what began to happen is I would grab a gun and I'd put one in the chamber. And I would sit there. And I remember vividly sitting on the edge of my bed and grabbing a gun, putting a gun in my hand, racking the slide, putting one in the chamber, and holding it and staring at it. And I just waited. And part of me feels like I was just curious what would happen. Here's the opportunity. Here's the motive. What would happen? Like, would I end my life? Because I was just so broken, and I thought I was coping. I thought I was dealing with it, but I wasn't. And I just sat there, and I waited, and I waited, and I waited. I remember being on the couch, and I would, same thing, grab a gun, put one in the chamber, and see what came first. Would I unload it and take it all the way apart, and step away from that situation, or go the other way? But one time, after the round went into the chamber, I thought to myself, all right, I heard very loudly, go ahead. And it scared me. Because I didn't know that I guess I was suicidal. I didn't, right? Had you asked me, I was fine. Had you asked me, I was just seeing what would happen. But I was close. And after I heard that, it really scared me. And, you hear people talk about spiritual warfare, and you hear people talk about how there's two sides, right? And there's two voices that you may potentially hear. And some people believe it, some people don't. But this showed me that it's real. I would say maybe a month later in the same situation, I heard, this isn't for you. This isn't what I drew out for you. This is the path that I wrote out for you. This isn't for you. And after that, I never grabbed a gun again. And, we grew up in church. We grew up, my dad was a minister, my grandfather was a pastor, and my uncle's a pastor. So we grew up around the word, but I never really deeply rooted myself in it as an adult, right? Just me and God having a relationship. And around this time, we were going to church, but after my dad passed, I stopped. I didn't want to be around people. I didn't want anybody having sympathy and this and that. And after I heard that, this isn't for you, this isn't for you, I started going again, consistently and regularly, right? To tap into what was available. And I was listening to a podcast one day. This is the moment that changed my life. And they sang a song that ministered to my spirit so deeply. I went to my room one time and I was feeling really bad. I was feeling really down. And I sang it. And when I tell you, I had an interaction with God, I just remember getting up off of the floor, from my knees, tears just pouring out of my eyes, like I just woke up from a dream. And I think that was the moment where I realized that that voice that I heard, the first one wasn't from God, right? We talked about spiritual warfare. That first voice wasn't for me, That was the devil trying to pull me down. And the second voice, this isn't for you. I've got plans for you. This isn't for you. That was the truth. And I sang the song almost every day after that day. And, the combination of the voice, the still small voice, and the church, and ministering through song brought me through to a whole nother level. Can I sing it? I can. It's not going to sound good, but it's simple. It's a really easy song. And still today, I sing it to myself. And it simply goes, press my way through, press my way through. I can't give up now. I must press my way through, oh Lord. Press my way through, press my way through. God's got something waiting if I just press my way through. There's 3 parts. Pray my way through, pray my way through. I can't give up now, I must pray my way through, oh Lord. Pray my way through, oh, pray my way through. I can't give up now, I must pray my way through. You can press and you can pray, but then you praise. You praise your way through. And that's what I was missing. Praise your way through. I can't give up now. I must praise my way through. Oh, praise my way through. Praise my way through. God's got something waiting, peace. God's got something waiting, joy. God's got something waiting, eternity. God's got something waiting, your mission. God's got something waiting, your business. God's got something waiting, your life. God's got something waiting, your family. God's got something waiting if you just praise your way through. And I would just sing it over and over and over and over and think about what God has for me. What did that mean that this wasn't for me? Okay, if this isn't for me, then what is? I still sing that song every day. And it strengthened me and it encouraged me and it brought me out of a dark place. Even today, it's still hard to say that I was suicidal, right? I didn't think of it that way. But if we're being honest, that was the case. And I had the means and I had the opportunity. It was nothing but the grace of God that kept me from the implementation. Less than a year later, 9-10 months later, my wife had a missed miscarriage early in the pregnancy at 8 weeks. And when I think about that moment and how painful it was and how much it scarred us, I think back of what it would have been like a year ago, right? A year prior or more, right? Would I have been able to be there and to stand strong and stand firm? I don't think I would have, right? To be there for her, to be there for myself, to pray every day, to pray over her, to pray over our future, and to just to connect with life and not get lost in pain. And I think that it's our obligation to learn from everything that we go through, and to take each moment and to take each scar and to build ourselves up with it, right? Get knocked down, you stand back up and you come up a little bit stronger. And man, I don't know what would have happened. I can't say it would have been one thing or the other, but what I do know is that over the past year, increasing in my faith, increasing in my understanding of God, increasing in my relationship with God, my life has changed for the better. Dark times, hard moments, right? We own businesses, we're self-employed, and there's moments where, we're wondering if rent's gonna get paid that month, right? Because we need something to happen, and something always happens. And, by no act of our own. So I can confidently say that God saved my life. He saved our business. He probably saved our marriage, right? Going through a miscarriage, I don't know stats or numbers, but I can imagine how many relationships that would tear apart. We came out stronger for it. And I'm just grateful. I'm grateful that God saved my life. And now, right, when you're saved, what do you do with that opportunity? What do you do with that newfound ability to sow into the world, right? What seed do you give? And so that's what we're doing. We're sowing, we're believing for greater, and we're finding ways to give, to pour out of ourselves, understanding that it could have been the end. My wife could have been a widow before our first anniversary, because I allowed a painful moment. I allowed my emotions to supersede what God was planning. I allowed what I was feeling to supersede what God had in store for me. I allowed my emotions to supersede my commitment to my wife, right? My vows didn't say, I guess they did say till death do you part, but not like that. Not like that. So that's it.